Welcome to Hope for Our Times, everybody. And guess who's joining me today? You guys are going to be loving this program today. None other than Monkey Werx is here at Hope for Our Times. Thank you, Monkey, for joining us, man. This is going to be fantastic.
Thanks, brother. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you, man. So appreciate you bringing me back, and look forward to the discussion today. This is some interesting time to be alive, man. There's no two ways about that.
It is indeed. I like your hat. So
thanks.
We're going to go golfing one day, and we're going to barbecue too, and I can't wait. Of course, I got to come to Texas, which isn't so bad to go to the great state of Texas anytime you can. That's going to be cool. Listen, we're going to have a great conversation today, everybody, so get ready and hold on for what's coming. So Monkey wrote an article not too long ago, America's Silent Collapse, a multi-stage threat without a single shot fired. Listen, folks, we're going to go through all 5 of those stages in just a minute. But we're going to get there. But I want to ask Monkey this first. Can you walk us through your journey from the military to becoming a voice that people trust on geopolitics and aviation?
Yeah, man. Well, I got to tell you, started out, spent, I did my 4 years in the Air Force back in the late 80s. So it's been a hot minute. But from there, I started working with commercial aviation companies, one of the largest actual carriers in the United States, in the top 4 for sure. And then, I jumped over from the commercial side of the world into the military, the defense contractor side of the house. And I did that for most of my career. Most of it was time spent doing proposal work and things of that nature. A lot of aftermarket support stuff, what they would call sustainment in the defense industry. And, I worked on hypersonic missiles and F-35 program, and which is going to narrow things down quite a bit for who I was working with. But and then a multitude of other, kind of, I guess you would say, dark space type of stuff, right? Things that were associated with DARPA, behind closed doors kind of thing. So, and then one day, I just decided this wasn't for me anymore. I got tired of the politics and all the things that go with it, being told how to think, what to think, when to think, and decided I want to be a self-thinker and stepped away from a career with no plan whatsoever, and posted one of my first videos out on YouTube, and it just went viral, and I went from 0 followers to about 400,000 followers in roughly 60 days. And then it's just, that's the rest is history. So, I'm a firm believer that God's going to put you exactly where he wants you. And that's what I am doing today is I'm just shining a light on the darkness, through whether it's what's going on in the skies around us, or whether it's through the news and tying those two together, or just a simple message of where we are from an end time prophecy perspective with the things as they relate around the world. Things like Isaiah 17 or Ezekiel 38, even Jeremiah 49. I mean, that one's even kind of coming onto the radar these days with what's going on with modern day Iran. So, but that's kind of where I am today. That's my journey, and I love doing what I do, and I just. It's always a pleasure getting to interact with folks like yourself. You and I have become good friends over the years, and it's just what a great time to be alive. To be able to witness our Lord and everything that He is doing, and knowing that His will be done. Regardless of what we want to do, it's all going to go according to His will.
Amen. You share a lot, and you get into some pretty intense stuff. You get into controversial things. There's some even risky areas that you approach. What is it that helps you to stay focused and just keep pressing forward? Because I know the temptation has got to be sometimes to say, maybe I better back off, or I'm a little bit concerned about some of the threats out there.
Yeah. Like the Nord Stream, for example, showing that flight data and everything that we did to take out the Nord Stream is certainly it is probably one of the number one things that I've done that really put me out there in terms of exposure and not necessarily in a positive light. So, and that's just, it's everything that I do is a leap of faith. I go with my gut and where I feel the Lord is leading me, and I just do his bidding and his work. And if heat comes onto me from that, then I'm in good company, and I know he's got me. So I just jump with that leap of faith. Yeah,
amen. Are you seeing signs of U.S. readiness or lack thereof for multi-front?
No lack of absolutely U.S. readiness. In fact, the amount of product that is going into the Middle East right now is astounding. I've tracked for weeks and weeks and weeks large amounts of C-17s going into the Middle East, and in recent days we had a bunch go into Tel Aviv or right near Tel Aviv, which was delivering bunker buster bombs. So, and I know that because I'm able to tie the flights with the articles in terms of what we're delivering to Israel. And that right there is very telling that Iran's probably about to get smacked because the bunker buster bombs are definitely something they'd be using to go after a lot of the Iranian nuclear sites and everything down below the ground that they like to hide in. So, yeah. And then, of course, Southeast Asia, we've got a pretty large presence out there to begin with, but we've got a lot of exercises going on right now. So I can see all the flights, headed that direction with respect to, Japan and the Philippines, et cetera. And then, of course, I monitor things going on with those countries' military flights, right? So Japan, I can see just about everything they have in terms of flying. Same thing with Australia. Yeah, just with the exception of fighter aircraft. I can't really track those, but you look for the air refuelers and they'll tell you exactly where the fighters are. So yeah, watching closely, just, establishing baselines. And that way, when we do see maybe a big shift in things going over to that direction, then it could be a pretty good indicator that we may go hot over in that area. So I think it's going to probably go from the Middle East to Southeast Asia, if I was a betting man.
Do you see it happening soon? I hear a lot of talk about Iran and their nukes and needing to be dealt with before they actually are able to fire something off at Israel. You mentioned all of these weaponry is coming into Israel. You think that's soon? I mean, because, we hear different reports and then sometimes, nothing really happens. But, Israel's in a mess with their situation with their neighbors that surround them.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think it's going to be sooner rather than later, mainly because, you don't tie up those kind of assets for something for a what if, it takes a lot more than just, half a dozen B-2 bombers and Diego Garcia to take out Iran. It's a big country. And, there's a lot of neighbors around Israel that don't want us using their airspace. So that ties to the logistic constraints. So, yeah, I mean, I do think there's definitely something on the near horizon. The fact that the bunker buster bombs all just arrived, the fact that we put THAAD in place, which is a high altitude missile defense system, which is different than anything else they have. That is really designed for people that have, intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so there isn't anybody there that has that in the Middle East, right? Other than Israel. They're the only ones that really have their own missile defense system, or not missile defense, but missile systems that are ICBMs, right? You've got Russia that has them, China, the United States, Israel, but it's not a large list of players. And when it comes to Middle East, it's the only ones that have them are Israel. So then that tells you there's a dynamic there that we're concerned about. That, when you start putting different type of missile defense systems in there besides David Sling or the Patriot, THAAD is very unique. And it's very telling on where the concerns lie, that it is certainly, they're definitely worried about somebody other than Iran popping something off. So
that's interesting. You mentioned Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49. Looking at those things, Isaiah 17, destruction of Damascus. Jeremiah 49 is Elam, a prophecy about Elam being destroyed, which is in modern day Iran. And those appear to be prophecies that are going to be fulfilled. So we look at what's going on right now. It's like maybe it's been the last couple of months, this eye of the storm or something like that, where not a lot has happened. I mean, we know what's going on with Gaza. I don't want to take away anything from Israel. Israel has their hands full. They're pushing into Syria. They're in the fight all day long, every single day. But it's not in our news, apart from someone like you bringing it to everybody's attention. But, you look at these prophecies, you're thinking it is just a matter of time. They have to be fulfilled.
Yeah. And it can't be that far off. All of the indicators, when we're watching these things unfold, would tell you that stuff's on a near-term horizon. I mean, it's not gonna. You're not talking 10 years out. You maybe a year at most. Yep. It could be closer than that. I think it's really going to depend on how the negotiations go with Iran. But even if the United States comes in and says, "Hey, we're satisfied with how this is," how everything is flushing out, and that Iran's going to dismantle their stuff, which I don't see them doing. In fact, Khomeini has basically dug his heels in and said, "We're not giving up anything." So how they keep coming back and saying, "Oh, it's been positive talks," I think somebody's just putting a spin on it. When you look at all the assets arriving in that region, it tells you that it's not going as well as maybe everybody's leading on. So,
very fascinating. I want to, when I come back to this in a few minutes, maybe pick up there, but then I want to move over to China and Southeast Asia. But first of all, I want to ask you about this. You wrote about America's silent collapse and a multi-stage threat without a single shot being fired, and you have 5 different stages. I want to ask you about those, but first of all, how can people connect with you?
monkeywerx.com is you can jump right over to that, and I've got every blog I've ever written I say every blog I've ever written since I transitioned over to the new website. But there's a lot of blogs out there that you can look at, including the one that we're about to talk about. But that's one way you can get me on Patreon. You can just look up Monkey Werx US over on Patreon, and I should pull up pretty quickly. And then, of course, YouTube.
In your article about these 5 stages in America's collapse, you wrote, "What if the greatest threat to the United States wasn't a nuclear strike or a foreign invasion or global war, but a slow, calculated takedown from within and afar, a collapse not triggered by missiles, but by manipulation, misinformation, and quiet conquest?" And then you write, "Here's how it could unfold without a single shot being fired." And you wrote, Stage 1, digital siege. The cyber offensive begins.
Yeah, I think if you just look at the world with AI and you look at just how creative people have gotten, you look at everything that's happening with these systems and infrastructure just being taken down, and people scrambling, right? You see just massive things just completely just flatline, all because of a cyber attack. And I think it's so simple in a roundabout way. I just don't think people are really thinking it through as to how easy it would be to take us down in the United States without a shot being fired. And a cyber attack would probably set the stage, because you could really come in and just start messing with everything across the country. And if not simultaneously, you could do it in pockets where it would create havoc here in the United States. And it wouldn't just stop at that, right? You'd come in and you'd hit, maybe power stations or water treatment plants or, medical facilities, any kind of thing, the banking, financial institutions, and people go into panic because all of a sudden they don't have access to the stuff they need. And knowledge, right? You talk about knowledge is power. And if you're not tapped in to what's going on and you're sitting in the dark trying to figure out exactly what is happening, and all you're being fed are just, chatter from little pockets here and there, you can go into panic pretty quickly. Now, the key to a lot of that too is, and we've actually had government entities do studies to figure out, okay, well, what happens if we have a total grid loss, like power out across the country? What happens? Well, within, just a matter of months, about 90% of your population is gone, which is crazy. You think about, where we've come, and the fact that, electricity and everything is kind of a modern thing. And the fact that without it, people die. Mm-hmm. Well, it's because you can't get gas in your car. You can't, if you don't have gas in your car, you can't get anywhere, because those pumps at the gas station are all electric. Everything, your comms, everything that we do, our internet, our TVs, the news that you get. But you're talking about hospital systems. How long can they run on backup generators? What happens if, say, for example, I've got backup generators on my house, but if the power grid goes down, those pump stations, you're not going to be able to get, there's pressure to those lines, but there are substations and all kinds of different things that feed all of that to make it work properly. And so it doesn't take much to take everybody offline and put everybody into a panic. And then from there, society just starts to implode, because now you've got panic and chaos, and people are trying to figure out, how do I get my money? How do I, how do I even get to work? What happens to my job? It doesn't take much for us to get into that environment. And I think a lot of people don't realize just how vulnerable we are as a country, as a whole. And it's not just the United States, but the world is that way.
I would think when we look at it from the U.S., you mentioned hospitals, you start thinking of grocery stores. They're not going to have groceries anymore. Right. Day one, nothing's going to get delivered. Trucks aren't going to be delivering. Out here in Psycho, California, they're trying to force everybody to drive electric cars. You start have electric stoves, have electric fireplaces, whatever. All these things, you're thinking this is just crazy. So you go down that path, nothing works. But even with pumping water into a house, so much is dependent upon, and pumping your sanitation is all dependent upon electricity and pumping plants. So I would think that you start having some really smelly areas real quick. Trash isn't going to get picked up. I don't think people realize how fast it would go bad. It would only be a few days of that. Yeah, so you're not going to be able to get money out of the bank. I'm just working through this in my head. You start looking at what good would your money do. Yeah. I'm thinking people are going to start breaking into houses, stealing anything they can to get food. Right. It's a pretty bleak scenario when you put it that way. And that's just stage one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you start watching everything that you had in your savings, just start to crumble because the markets start to topple, and the supply chain, as you mentioned, things getting to grocery stores. If you can't get gas, or if the highway systems or whatever aren't functioning properly, people are backed up. With the electric cars, for example, they only go so far, and then you're basically just sitting in a paperweight. Those are the kind of things that you have to really start to think through. And even in the best of scenarios, like for myself, I feel like I'm pretty standalone. I've done a lot of prepping. I've got generators on my house, but I go talk to my neighbor who's in the gas industry. And he's like, oh, those generators ain't going to work if the power goes down. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, if the power goes out on a national level, you're not going to get stuff pushed to your house. You're not going to have a lot of things that you're accustomed to are going to just start to fizzle out. I give you an example. In Texas, a couple of years ago, we had a huge freeze. Yeah. And people, their pools were freezing over and all kinds of stuff because the power went down. The pumps weren't working, right? And so all the lines froze up. But then when they tried to get power back onto certain areas, those pumps that came back on and the lines were frozen basically ruptured. Now you got water blowing everywhere that is freezing. But the toilets start backing up. And if your pump stations aren't working, you're not going to get, more than likely, you're not going to get fresh water to your house. You're not going to have your toilets will actually start to back up if you're on any type of a city system. You know, if you're on septic, you may be all right for a little longer, but yeah, that's something that you don't really think about. And when you start talking about backed up fecal matter into your house, man, yeah, the smell is going to be bad. But, you know, now you start talking about health issues, things that are going to start affecting people's health. So
getting disease and all kinds of things. So who would do something like this? What kind of enemies does the U.S. have that would do something like that? Or could do something like that?
Who wouldn't do something like that? Really, it's you look at first you think, okay, well, you got the obvious, right? China would be a big threat on this. Russia, right? Another one that would probably be the top two that you would think. But then you get into other little smaller countries like North Korea. North Korea's got a pretty robust cyber attack team, guys. Like talking criminal hackers level stuff. They could do something like that. And then, of course, that's looking at it from outside. If you were trying people to, but once all your systems start going down, your grid starts to fail, and say your internet collapses, at that point, it would have to be internal actors. And we have had, porous borders for so long. There are so many bad actors in our country. It's not even funny. I mean, when your Homeland Security can go out in first 60 days, arrest 100,000 people and not even scratch the surface, goes to tell you that we got a lot of people in this country that don't need to be here, that have more than likely ill intent for us, right? And you talk about the simple things like groceries and not being able to get things at a grocery store. Just that in and of itself would set panic into most of society, right? People would start, and if maybe not as a whole across the entire country at one time, but in pockets, it would start. Your hospital systems would be chaotic because you have no medical record system. You have everybody. I mean, there's not, you don't just go to a filing cabinet and pull out things and start pulling people's records, because it's not like a small doctor's office. These are major, hospital systems. Trying to keep tabs on billing, on getting medications, and even then that stuff would start to run out. There's just a lot of different things like that would come into play very, very rapidly. And so that's where, I say from the stage 2 perspective, that economic destabilization, where everything just starts to be upended because it's chaos, right?
So yeah, you start with stage 1, which we just covered. Then you go into stage 2, and there's 5 stages you have. At stage 1 is looking pretty bad. So I'm thinking, this is the things that we are facing. What does the America's collapse look like? We know that America isn't a player in the last days when it comes to Bible prophecy. So is it because of the rapture, or is it because of something like this? So we go into stage 2. We have economic destabilization.
Right. Well, and that is kind of what we were talking about, just in terms of just the economy just being on this really rocky ground, right? I mean, bank systems would be coming on and off. Any type of information that's getting out there would probably be in a state of panic, right? So people will be looking at mainstream media, which they don't trust, if they could even get access to that. The social media side, the things like that I do. There's a lot of people out there, and we see it today. You've experienced it. There's a lot of influencers out there that don't really have the background for certain things that they discuss. They don't really understand the complexities to it. And so they make a kind of a judgment call on what they think they're seeing. And it may not necessarily be right. Sometimes, not saying they're not always right or not always wrong, but it's a gamble. You don't know anything about that person. You don't know what their background is. You don't understand whether or not they're subject matter expert in that, or if they're just hip shot and stuff. And you can see, you take that, then you take these bad actors who could easily just create stuff with AI. You've got, deep fakes and things like that. You don't know if you're looking at a real person or not, unless they got six fingers, right? But, and then they pump it with misinformation or disinformation. And we see that kind of campaign happening in pockets here and there. I think what, could potentially happen is all of it starts to culminate together, where when you do have access to information, you do start to get a little bit of information on what's going on. It's going to be chummed, full of just bad, good parts and bad parts. And you really don't know what is good and what's bad, or what's truth and what's not. So
I was going to ask you about that, because number 3, you have erosion of trust, psychological and cultural warfare. And I look at where we've been over the last 5 years, take what I do and what you do. And it appears to me, from what I do with the Bible prophecy, it appears to me that my circle has been infiltrated by some bad actors, intentionally.
Yes.
By people who come in and plant these things that I know aren't true. They're not legit, but they start to discredit everyone. And it also causes you to go, well, who do you trust? You can't trust Fauci, right? So we know that. Right. But then you start looking on the inside, you're going, in my inside circle, you start having problems. And I think that's what's happening. Yeah,
no, it really is. Early on, I mean, if you went 10, 15 years ago, if the biggest threat really, besides maybe some extreme rogue actors from your world, were people just taking, maybe a scripture out of context, right? So they would just read the one little sentence and then, just try to match that with something going on in the world today, right? Where, they don't get the big picture. But today they're not even referencing the Bible. They're just headed off in a direction, and just making it up as they go. You're totally right. And then you've got your biblical bullies out there that like to, just flambe people if they are, not in line with their viewpoints in the way of, their thinking. And so it's gotten really volatile. It's unfortunate that it is like that. And I think there are people that know there's certain lanes they can swim in that are solid, always trustworthy, that are going to, always steer them in the right direction and not mislead or misguide them. But there is that little world out there where you just, all it takes is just, stumble off a little bit. And then all of a sudden you're into all kinds of wild and crazy stuff. So,
well, yeah, you even write into here under the, this stage 3 erosion of trust. You're right. The American mind becomes the battlefield. They talk about algorithms, and civic unity unravels, protests ignite over staged incidents fueled by anonymous online leaks. Each region believes a different version of the truth. And man, we can see all of this being developed. Everybody lives in their own echo chamber. And this whole system we're like set up for that.
No, we really are. In fact, most of the stuff that I talk about is already happening in little pockets, and not maybe on a grand scale. And it hasn't been orchestrated to a point where you're listening to the symphony play. But what you are is you're hearing the instruments being tuned at this point. And so it's, there's a lot of that going on. You can see them try to do things like race bait us, get us, fighting against each other, infighting. And the ones that are behind most of that are going to be, in a lot of cases, either foreign actors or it's, foreign governments. But our own government is behind that too. I mean, look at the Democratic Party and the things that they're doing. If we haven't figured out, as many of them are heading down to try and free out a Venezuelan gang member or an MS-13 gang member or whatever it may be, stopping the deportations of Venezuelan gangs, et cetera. You just kind of have to really stop and pause for a minute and go, whose side are they really on? But yeah, it's that psychological warfare. You can go back to, just in the last 10 years, and look at all the psyops that have happened. In fact, Benghazi started out with a similar theme, right? Where we were told that it was somebody posting, I think, anti-Muslim stuff somewhere, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, we're being led down this path of how things unfolded in Benghazi, and they tried to blame it on some internet posting or something, and
no kidding.
which was all fake. You can watch. Just look at the Middle East. You look at what's going on with Gaza and everything, and then you go look at the AI that's been pushed out there. And if you're not paying close attention, you don't realize that the kid that supposedly just got bombed and lost his parents has 6 fingers. And so that's the world we're in now. And if you don't have a tremendous amount of discernment, you're going to get fooled most of the time.
Well, no kidding. So thinking of, we have these rogue judges, and was the governor of Maryland or whatever, goes down to El Salvador. I mean, you start having these judges that are definitely trying to keep criminals from being deported and bring criminals back. Okay, so if we have that, the border's been blown wide open. Texas has been greatly affected by it. But then we have, I did a video about a year or so ago on the 5th column, and went back to Alexander the Great and recognizing the value of the 5th column. It's the enemy on the inside, and that is what we have, is this enemy
100%.
on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, you can go look at ancient Rome and how that fell, and it was from within. And the same thing is happening here. We've got at some point, or at one point, the number that came out was 20 million illegals inside our country.
Jeez.
And there's a large amount of those that our government let in knowing they were bad. So it's, they're
still here.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't take much to really fuel that fire.
No kidding. Get rid of 100,000, you still have 19,900,000 in here. And that's just what has been counted. Who knows?
And that's bigger than any army on the planet,
Man. Stage 4, infrastructure attacks by proxy. It's not tanks rolling through the streets. It's train derailments, you're right, refinery explosions, food processing plant fires, all seemingly random, all just accidents until they're not. And we're being set up for this. We're already watching this.
Yeah, actually, go back and look. What was it? Under the Biden administration, there was something like 100 different plants or factories that have just been, just gone. They have fires, what are the odds of that happening?
Yeah, no kidding.
A lot of that ties back to the cyber side of the house, believe it or not. I spoke with a guy one time, a couple of years ago now, that was a cyber expert. And he directed me over to this video on YouTube, and he said, go watch this video. And all it is, it's a diesel generator inside of a factory. And this generator it's running, and then all of a sudden you see it just start puffing black smoke. It catches on fire, and then they have to come in and put out the fire. But what it was proof that people can hack into a lot of these plants and these systems and overheat things and cause fires. And so we watch it, and it doesn't just happen here in the U.S. We see really strange things happening in Russia and Ukraine, all around the world. But here in the United States, what are the odds that we'd have 100 factory fires that would impact our food? I mean, that's the kind of thing you can't make up. I mean, it's statistically the probability of that happening is got to be just astronomical. And it didn't just stop there. What has happened in recent months, right? We've got munition factories blowing up, or catching on fire. And we just had one of our rocket motor companies, and which, by the way, if you're not familiar with solid rocket motors and people that make those kind of things, there are only like 5 companies in the United States that actually make rocket motors. It's not a lot. And so all of our contractors that are doing defense stuff are all reliant on those 5 companies. And if one of them goes offline, it impacts all kinds of things from a national security perspective here in our country, because now you can't bring on new, say, hypersonic missile systems or continue to maintain existing systems because there's nobody else to make them, and some of them are unique in nature. So each one has, some of the companies have similar capabilities, but some of them don't. Like there's some that they specialize in, like, thrust vectoring things, which if you're not familiar with that, that's where the nozzle moves, right? And so it allows things to turn it. In fact, if you watch SpaceX stuff, when they come back down, you'll see those rockets on the bottom moving back and forth. It's because they're thrust vectoring all the way to the ground. So, there's companies out there that they come offline. You don't get them back on for sometimes 6, 8, 10 months, sometimes longer than that, depending on what capability was and how big it was.
It's very interesting as we watch things. You mentioned just some of the fires, and there was a large cattle ranch in Texas where it was just, I don't know how many heads of cattle were lost. And so I have a friend that's a dairy farmer who is affiliated with that ranch down there. Said it didn't just happen.
Right.
They were adamant. And then it was also a couple of years ago where all those cows, I think it was in Kansas, I'm not sure if it was in Kansas, all of a sudden they just all fell dead at the same time. I don't know how many thousands of them there were. You see there's some very odd things that keep happening. Then we have talk of the bird flu. Interesting that they're saying you can't eat meat, and they're going after the cows and the chickens and the eggs, and you're going,
exactly.
If you got bird flu, why are you only going after these things? Why not? Very strange. The 3 things that we are very dependent upon for humans. Stage 5, you have controlled chaos. The global players move. With the U.S. government paralyzed by internal division, cyber confusion, and civil unrest, foreign powers step in, not with bombs, but with offers.
Yeah. I mean, go look at BRICS. Look what BRICS is doing. Look at the tariffs that are happening right now with China, and look at the impact that that's going to have. I think we are now charging them 145%. They're at 125%, if not matching us already. You got bond markets selling off. You've got a lot of different things where people are starting to distance themselves from the U.S. dollar because they can see things happening. And that's kind of the direction I was headed was, if people drop off the dollar and the dollar collapses, the rest of the world follows. And I don't know that everybody really grasps exactly what that means. The dollar has been the cornerstone to everything in the world. And if that dollar goes away, what's to replace it? There's really not a lot of options out there, and everybody's dependent on it. If we've learned nothing more from the Doge stuff, is the fact that our government is basically funding every government around the world. We are it is already in essence a one world government, just because the United States has got we're delving out every dime that we can get our hands on, and then whatever we can produce as well. And so that's, probably the biggest thing. You hear all these countries, raising a stink about tariffs and all that stuff. Well, the tariffs, that's money that they've made, and we're still paying all these taxes in. Back in the day, the tariffs, we had no taxes because the tariffs covered those taxes. And then all of a sudden we quit, charging tariffs to people. They continue to charge tariffs to us. And then, of course, we send our tax dollars abroad. So it doesn't take much. I mean, and you go back to the whole point about the trust, who to trust. Government trust right now for the United States and actually governments around the world is at an all-time low. I mean, people don't trust our government as far as they can throw them. And even with Trump in office, there's still a lot of, trust but verify, right? It's just not going to take much to shake that foundation to the point where people don't believe anything they're seeing. Don't trust the dollar. Don't trust anything that's going on in the world. So,
man, okay. I mean, we look at all of these different things. It looks like a really bleak future. I was going to ask you about China and the South, what's going on in South Asia, but I think what I'll do is this: who do you trust? What is it? I mean, when we look at the only thing we have hope in is the Lord Jesus Christ. And it seems like that's the direction that God is like shouting at us. Hey, listen, I'm giving you this shot. Take advantage of the time that you have left here. And you can see all of the warning signs, all of these things. We're like on the verge of whatever could happen next, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Monkey, what's the hope that you have?
Well, the thing is that we have to remember we're all handpicked for this very time, and God has got a very specific mission for us, and that is to continue on with preaching the gospel, with sharing the good news, and realizing that everything that we've ever done, past, present, and future, has been paid for in full on the cross. And that is the hope, and that's what I grab onto every single day, just knowing that I'm here, I'm on a mission, but at the end of the day, I know where I'm going, and I want as many people as I can get in that, and at that Last Supper with me. So,
amen. What would you say to somebody who's just stumbled on this program and they're thinking, man, this is scary stuff. They don't know the Lord. What would be your word of advice for them?
I would just say, dig in, get strong in prayer, start to understand your Maker. And, it's most of us don't necessarily, you're not saved and then you start to pray, right? What happens is you start to have those quiet conversations with God. Something happens in your life and you start to realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm not talking to myself anymore. I'm asking a question. And I would tell people that to continue to ask those questions and continue to seek Him out, and then just at the right time, you're going to know it's time to stop talking and start listening, and recognize that He's going to start pulling on your heart, and He's going to start making those changes, and you will get there. And it doesn't have anything to do with how big a man you are or how well you've raised your family and you're just the best mama or grandmama in the world. None of that stuff matters, and you can set the egos aside and recognize that at the end of the day, we are all baselined exactly where we need to be with our Maker, and that is, He wants us to be with Him for eternity. And if this stuff is scaring you, maybe that's God just putting a little nudge on your heart and trying to wake you up a little bit before things happen.
Indeed, and everything is going this direction that the Bible foretold it was going to go thousands of years ago. God said in the book of Isaiah, He tells us the end from the beginning, and we can see it, and everything is coming together. It's like, I just feel like God is shouting at people, hey, turn to me. I'm here, just turn to me. I'll answer you. I think of the centurion in Acts chapter 10. He was exactly like you said. He wasn't saved and then started turning to the Lord. No, it was through this process. You can read about him. And then God reached out to him. And that's how I came to know the Lord. It was this process of, man, I need help. I want answers. And God has answers, and we don't need to be afraid. We got the hope of the Lord Jesus Christ. Monkey, it was great having you on today. I had so many more things I wanted to go and ask you about China and national security, of possible foreign invasion, all these different things. But man, we covered a lot in the time that we had.
Yeah, we did.
It was great. Great having you on. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Folks, thanks for joining us today. Again, you can connect with Monkey. How can people connect with you again, Monkey?
Yeah, monkeywerx.com. Just jump over there. It's WERX, and that'll take you there. Or just you can Google me, and I'll pop up. It'll show probably everywhere that I am. So
that's great. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next time. God bless. See ya.